Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Got some great, exciting news that we've been able to solve a homicide that's 30 years in the making. But first, before further ado, I want to introduce some special guests. We have Ginger Madden, our state attorney for the First Judicial Circuit. We have Michelle Sandler. She is the assistant. Michelle, come on up. Michelle Sandler from the Assistant State Attorney's Office. She's, Assistant State Attorney. We have Chris Williams, Pensacola Special Agent in charge out of that field office. Mark Zager, Special Agent, Florida Department of Law Enforcement as well. Dr. Deanna Aleski, Chief Medical Examiner for District 1 Medical Examiner, who was critical in solving this case. Absolutely instrumental, her office was. Dan Shebler, which is Director of Operation, District 1 Medical Examiner's Office. And Chrissy Neaton, Chief Investigator, District 1 Medical Examiner's Office. Dave Nutting, which is Law Enforcement Liaison for Othram. And then our own case investigators, Investigator Kelly Henderson, and Investigator Aaron Pittman. I think I did I leave anybody out? Oh no, I got you, Zager, and yeah, thank you. All right, so the last unidentified victim of the notorious Happy Face Killer has now been identified. She is no longer a Jane Doe. Keith Jesperson is now charged with murder and of the Jane Doe that we had previously known as Jane Doe since September of '94. He's been in prison in Oregon. He's already serving 7 life sentences for 7 other homicides between 1990 and 1995. He was caught in '95 and admitted to killing 7 others, in addition to the one he was originally charged with, for a total of 8. He committed these while being a long-haul trucker and killed these women in 6 different states, to include California, Nebraska, Wyoming, Oregon, Washington, and Florida. The relentless efforts of the OCSO, FDLE, Florida Medical Examiner's Office, and the State Attorney's Office, as well as the private lamb Othram, it was instrumental in us solving this case. Otherwise, it would likely still be unsolved. The victim is now known that she was 34 years old, and her family is in Wisconsin. Her identity is known as Suzanne Schellenberg. It's spelled KJ, but it is pronounced SH, Schellenberg. Her family obviously wants privacy at this time. With the new events that have unfolded and details, they're obviously dealing with that, so please protect their privacy. In February 1996, Jesperson actually admitted to killing our victim. Unfortunately, we didn't know the identity of our victim, and admitted to killing someone in this area and dumping her body. We had him as a suspect early on. Just didn't have an identity for our victim. The identity was not learned until March of 2023, this year, and that was after the District 1 Medical Examiner's Office sent to Othram Inc., which out of Woodlands, Texas, and they are specialized in genealogy DNA analysis. That development sent so while at Othram during the analysis, it was determined that they were able to narrow down a family member, and a family member gave a sample, and it became 100% DNA hit for Suzanne Schellenberg. The development sent our investigators Kelly Henderson, Aaron Pittman, and FDLE's investigator Mark Zager, as well as Michelle Sandler from the First Judicial Circuit, our First Judicial State Attorney's Office, to interview Jesperson. This interview was unannounced. He did not know they were coming, but he fully cooperated. And exactly 29 years to the day after her body was found, they went to Oregon to interview him. He talked openly about the murder and how it took place. He picked her up at a truck stop in Tampa and brought her up to the Panhandle. We don't know exactly where this happened, but he describes it as a rest area. He describes brutally on how he killed her. He alleges that she was sleeping in his bed, I'm assuming of his rig, and he was allegedly parked next to a security guard, and when he went to sit next to her, she began to scream. He said she would not stop screaming. He was nervous because he was concerned because he was not allowed to have authorized riders, and so he used zip ties, electrical zip ties, to cut off her airway, and then further used his fist forcibly to cut off her airway to the point where she was deceased. She was the 6th victim out of the 8 victims. We believe she's the 6th one he killed. And he talked about the murder openly, and he dumped her body a short time later in Holt on the side of the I-10, and was discovered September the 14th of '94 by a inmate work crew that was working along doing landscaping, and the body was found in a tree line. He's known as the Happy Face Killer because he sent the media details of his homicides and would always end it with a smiley face. He kind of got caught himself because the first murder he committed in Oregon, some random lady just said she killed the female along with her abusive boyfriend, which was not true, and he got upset by this, so he started sending media letters describing it, and he got no attention with that, or not enough, so he sent it to authorities, to which ultimately landed his prosecution for that case. Unfortunately, not before several other women had been killed. His first victim was in Oregon. Suzanne deserves a voice, and we're that voice for her today, and this case has been years in the making. There's others here that I've already introduced that we're going to recognize, and they're going to be able to tell you about their roles of their entities and agencies and how they were involved. But I want to say that investigator Glenn Barbary, who's retired, and FDLE agent Dennis Haley, that are retired, they were initial case agents, and they were instrumental in us at least obtaining a suspect early on. It's unfortunate that it took this long to bring this case to justice. But before I conclude and bring them up here, and we'll do question and answers after these individuals get a chance to talk, I want to reiterate how proud I am from these investigative team that we have, not just from the Sheriff's Office, but all these men and women standing up here before you. We've had over a dozen cold cases. We've really had a good reputation here at the Sheriff's Office for solving cold cases. We've solved over a dozen that I know of in the last 10 years, 7 since my administration began, some of which were 40 years old. We did a press conference about this earlier this year. And this particular one is 29 years. It's, again, the 7th one, and we've had national recognition on shows like Dateline and 48 Hours and Cold Justice. And it's solely because of a testament of the dedication and relentless tenacity of the investigative teamwork coupled with advances in forensic evidence that allows us to bring justice to Suzanne and her family nearly 30 years after her death.
Just briefly.
Sure.
I don't have any prepared statement today, but I would like to just very briefly state how proud I am that the State Attorney's Office could be a part of this partnership with FDLE, the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office, the Medical Examiner's Office, in bringing this to a successful conclusion. I want to especially recognize Special Prosecutor Michelle Sandler from the State Attorney's Office, who has demonstrated her dedication and commitment to solving these cold cases. She's been a very large part of not only this case, but other cold cases that the Sheriff's Office has been able to bring closure to in the past several years. While I am the state attorney and often the one who's called to the podium to speak, it is the very hard-working assistant state attorneys who work for me that are instrumental in seeing that these things are done. I want to restate my commitment and the commitment of the state attorney's office to bringing these cases to a conclusion, whether they're 4 hours old or 40 years old. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dr. Deanna Aleski. I'm the Chief Medical Examiner for District 1. I just briefly want to touch on why this took 29 years to put a name to her face. So in September 14th or 15th of 1994, we received the skeletonized remains of a female found near I-10. And during the initial investigation, we sent the remains to the Pound Lab at the University of Florida in Gainesville for analysis. And the osteological examination determined that this was a white female, and she was aged approximately 35 to 55 years old. We sent some samples for additional examination for estimation of time since death, and a clay reconstruction, which you can see played on the screens here, of her face did not unfortunately generate any leads. Later, the serial killer Keith Jesperson admitted to killing this woman and disposing her remains in the area, stating that she had called herself Suzanne. In 2007, a forensic artist completed a new facial reconstruction in hopes of identifying the victim. In 2008, we sent additional anthropological analysis to University of West Florida, and specimens were also sent to the FBI laboratory for DNA analysis and entry into the National Missing Persons DNA database. Mitochondrial DNA was analyzed and entered into CODIS, and in 2018, the specimens were even sent for isotope analysis at the University of Florida. In late of 2022, I attended the National Association of Medical Examiners conference where they were beginning to discuss utilizing a different approach to identifying the unknown, and that was through genetic genealogy. And the company Orthram was mentioned because they were starting to do a pilot project of which it would cost nothing to be able to identify some of our more pertinent cases, especially those who are homicides. And immediately I asked my associate medical examiner, Dr. Lorraine Lopez, hey, can we do this? And she said, I'm on it. And sure enough, she did. She figured it out. She contacted Orthram, and within 6 weeks that we sent them the remains, they had a hit. It was unbelievable. It was truly miraculous. I thought from the beginning that we would be able to identify her, and I had no idea we'd do it in 6 weeks. So thank you from Dave of Orthram and the Orthram team. I want to thank Dr. Lorraine Lopez, who initiated this, and Chrissy Neaton. So thank you.
Good morning, Chris Williams with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Just real brief, I just want to focus on one word, and that's tenacity. You could hear that in the doctor's voice. You can hear that in the sheriff's voice. But there's been tenacity in this case for the last 30 years. I can remember this case. I was talking to some fellow investigators. I remember this case growing up. I grew up in Okaloosa County, so particularly proud of the investigators, the deputies, the special agents who have worked this case. They never quit. I can tell you there's other unsolved homicides, and they're not going to quit on those either. Advances in technology are critical to solving these cases. And to Doc's point, in 6 weeks, essentially they solved a case that we've been working on for the last 30 years, and that is incredible. And we really got to continue, double down on that. I'm really proud of the sheriff investing in this. It's clearly important, not just to the family, obviously to the family, but it's important to the community, to healing, to figuring out what happened. This is important, and I'm really proud to see law enforcement teaming to do this. I'm proud of the team that put this together, so they should be commended. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is David Nutting. I'm a law enforcement liaison with Orthram. You heard we're a Texas-based company, and the service provided by Orthram for this case were actually funded by the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, also known as NAMUS. NAMUS is funded and administered by the National Institute of Justice and managed by RTI International. And RTI assists the criminal justice community with the investigation and resolution of missing, unidentified, and unclaimed persons cases across the United States and its territories. We're grateful to RTI, NAMUS, and NIJ for their support in this case and others. It's important to note that Orthram does not solve cases. The cases are solved through the hard work of law enforcement and the collaborative effort of the medical examiner's office, the state attorney's office. As you can see behind me, it genuinely takes a team. Orthram plays an integral part, but we do not solve cases. Orthram is grateful that we are trusted to provide actionable investigative leads to law enforcement in unresolved investigations. This has been achieved by the trust Orthram has in its technology, which has demonstrated success after success. This case represents 102 resolutions this year alone by Orthram. This has been achieved when there is any DNA available to potentially resolve cases, no matter how little, there is potential for case resolution. Orthram is working through cutting-edge research and development to develop investigative leads for law enforcement with smaller and smaller amounts of DNA all the time. Suzanne's family now has answers. Suzanne's identification continues to create awareness of the thousands of other unidentified victims, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. There's over 14,000 unidentified human remains in the United States and its territories. The technology exists to resolve these cases. We're only limited at this point by the lack of funding. Orthram will continue to raise awareness, increase funding, and bring resolution to cases throughout Florida and beyond. Thank you.
Anyone? We can begin the question and answers. Probably have to get those specific people that are experts in whatever question you have. Anyone? Kimber?
Hey, Sheriff, yes. Can we start by spelling her last name? If you
Yeah.
don't mind doing us a favor.
Yeah, I mean, it's Schellenberg, but it is spelled Suzanne, common spelling Suzanne, and then Kjellenberg. But oddly enough, it's spelled or pronounced Schellenberg.
Thank you, Sheriff. And now that we have identified her, I know the history of the Happy Face killer, he did have a specific target looking back at all of his cases. Do we have any more about her occupation at the time of her death?
I don't. I believe she was.
She's a drifter.
Yeah, she was a drifter. I mean, I hate to say that, but she was kind of she was picked up at a truck stop and was known to kind of do the drift around like that, but no real occupation that we know of. Anybody else?
I was just a bit curious about the DNA sample. How were you all able to narrow it down and find a family member? I'm not sure
Go ahead, sir.
exactly how all that works. But
Sure. So conventional DNA was utilized. When I say conventional, the methods of developing and comparing to known databases. Well, the forensic genetic genealogy is obviously an emerging technology, and Othram will develop a profile from the remains and submit that into a genealogy databases, and we have a team of nearly a dozen forensic genetic genealogists on staff who work through publicly available databases to search to find relatives. And once we narrow it down through those databases, we're able to provide leads to law enforcement so they can go and pursue those leads, whether it's a suspect or a unidentified human remain, as it was in this case. And the detectives can speak probably more to going and sampling families and relatives to narrow it down to eventually identify the decedent, Suzanne in this case. Does that answer your question?
yes.
Okay.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Kimber.
Yes, Sheriff. So obviously sending our detectives up to Oregon to sit face-to-face with Keith Jesperson, can you talk about what goes into being in the same room as someone who's notorious for doing horrendous crimes like that man did?
Well, there's investigative tools, and our investigators are highly skilled in training and learning how to interrogate individuals. And sometimes you almost have to get on their level and treat them as they're human, even though that they're scum, garbage, and vile individuals. But sometimes what it takes to be able to get a confession out of them. And I have to say he was very cooperative. They could speak to that a lot better than I can, but I wasn't there. But and by the way, if I failed to say this, all of our interview, is that correct, Michelle, will be on our body-worn camera video, and all that will be available?
Excerpts available immediately, and then the other one will be available.
Yeah, so you can see the entire interview. He doesn't mind talking about the homicide, which is, but it is what we're here for, and it's unfortunate as it is. And but yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a child molester, a rapist, a homicide case. You have to be able to use those skills that they're highly trained, and everybody up here is highly trained in learning how to try and get that confession out of them. Sometimes you have to use those tactics that we're trained in.
As far as prosecuting him for this murder, you said he is being charged with this murder. Is there any plan to extradite him back to Florida or anything like that? What's the game?
That's a great question. Obviously, he didn't want to come back to Florida. He didn't want to face the death penalty. It was part of the agreement. Michelle, would you or either one of y'all want to speak to the actual deal, so to speak, that he got?
So Mr. Jesperson currently has an active charge of murder here in the state of Florida. We will be working with the Oregon Department of Corrections to procure his appearance here in Florida by some manner or method. We're not sure whether it will be Zoom or whether he'll physically be here, but we are working with authorities to make sure that he is prosecuted in the state of Florida.
Thank you. So he's serving 7 other life sentences. He's not going anywhere, and we anticipate that he'll just end his life there, but they'll work out all the details of it. You know, he's formally charged. Anything else? Go ahead.
Do we have any list of official charges, or are they still working on what he will
Open
be
count of
charged with?
homicide, right? I mean, it's one count of homicide. All right, well, if that pretty much concludes, and I want to thank everybody that's up here for the great teamwork. The stakeholders that we have are second to none. You know, again, without their tireless efforts and decades, and I can tell you, any family member that's still got a loved one out there that's missing or that's been deceased and we haven't solved it, there is not anything that we take more pride in than trying to solve these cases, and I think our reputation speaks for itself in this district and certainly at this agency, and every one of those investigators that's assigned with a cold case is tasked with opening that thing once a month and trying to breathe life back into it, and we won't stop. Thank you.